Hello, my name is Cedric J. Austin, and today I will be discussing the article Effects of Low-Dose Creatine Monohydrate on Muscle Strength and Endurance. This article was written by Dr. Nito along with several others. The purpose of this research is to determine whether creatine can improve muscular strength and endurance if taken over a prolonged period. For those who are unfamiliar with what creatine is, it's a natural nutrient mainly found in small amounts of food or animal origin, and is also endogenously synthesized in small amounts by the liver, kidneys, and pancreas from the amino acid glycine, methionine, and arginine. A controlled clinical research trial of 36 healthy men were randomly placed into three groups to determine the effects of low doses of creatine on the body while performing resistance training over a period of 6 weeks. Group G3 consumed 3 grams of creatine per day. Group G5 consumed 5 grams of creatine per day, and Group GP was given a placebo. It should be noted that each participant maintained their regular eating habits while performing the study. At the end of each week, the participants were tested to evaluate any increases of strength throughout the clinical study. Creatine in low doses of 3 and 5 grams per day could be effective, increasing maximum muscle strength and fatigue resistance. It should also be noted significant improvements showed after 7 days of creatine supplemented use. A higher dose of 5 grams of creatine per day for a minimum of 14 days seems to be necessary for a significant improvement. Now, the literature. The effects of continuous low-dose creatine supplementation on force, power, and total work. The study of this article concluded administering a low dose of creatine of 7.7 grams of creatine for 21 days showed a significant increase in strength. It's important to note the supplemental intake of creatine per day is 2.7 grams per day more than the research supplementation. The second piece of research, short-term creatine supplementation has no impact on upper body anaerobic power in trained wrestlers. Based on the study of 20 wrestlers administering a supplemental intake of creatine, the study of this article concluded no improvements were observed. It's also important to note the supplemental intake of creatine per day is 2.7 and 2.47 grams of creatine less than the research supplementation. The final piece of literature, the effects of a 10-week periodized off-season resistance training program and creatine supplementation among collegiate football players. The study of this article concluded administering creatine supplementations of 3 grams of creatine per day for 5 weeks showed no significant improvements. The benefits of low and continuous doses of supplementation of creatine have not yet been fully explained. Issues such as dose, minimal time of use, and influence of resistance training during supplementation remain the subject of doubt and questions in the scientific and sports world. The study of this research was to determine any improvement in maximum strength, potency, or muscle endurance in subjects on low-dose creatine monohydrate supplementations. To investigate the effects of low-dose supplementation of creatine monohydrates without the use of saturation phase. Methodology. Materials. There were 36 healthy men with a mean age of 22 and a half. The height is 1.17 meters. Weight is 77 kilograms. Body mass index is 24.6. Creatine and placebos were prepared in 36 kits with 35 sachets each. Experimental and control groups. There were 3 groups. The first group is G3, which consumed 3 grams of creatine. Group G5 consumed 5 grams of creatine. And groups GP took a placebo. This experiment was randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial. These trials consisted of muscular strength, or 1 rep max, upper body muscle endurance, which is MPU, or maximum push-ups, and lastly, abdominal muscle endurance, or MSU, which is maximum sit-ups. Each participant was advised to avoid alcohol consumption and not to change their food intake habits. Now, the steps used to carry out the experiment. Participants were instructed to mix and dissolve the contents of the sachets in 200 milliliters of water before drinking the solution. The participants performed the resistance training in a systematic and acidosis manner at least 6 months before the commencement of the study. 6 participants who did not fully observe the training protocol or perform all required tests were excluded. The 6-week intervention time, or 35 days, with the first week was aimed at familiarizing the physical test and the adaptation to the resistance training program. Tests were performed after the familiarization week, i.e. before the beginning of the supplementation at the end of each week. Tests were performed under supervision of a trainer with a degree in physical education with a specialization in biomechanics and physiology and over 20 years of experience in resistance training. Now the discussion. In the initial pre-supplemented test for maximum strength compared to 35 days after supplementation showed all groups significantly increased. The research also determined there was not a significant increase in the strength from groups G3 and G5. Based on the percentage of strength increase, the creatine supplementation groups G3 and G5 had a significantly higher increase than the placebo groups. Interestingly enough, there was no significant difference in the percentage of strength increase between the creatine supplement groups. Over time, the creatine supplement group showed significant strength increases after 7 days, while the placebo group started showing signs only after 14 days. If you take a look at this chart, this shows the muscular strength or 1 rep max, and it shows how all groups significantly increased. This increases from the pre to the post. Next, the upper body muscular endurance, or MPU. Based on the MPU, or maximum push-ups, there was no significant difference between the pre-supplementation and after 35 days of supplementation in GP and G3. G5 shows a significant difference in upper limb muscles after 14 days of supplementation. But note that it only took 7 days for the 1 rep max. As you can see in the MPU, or maximum push-ups, there is no significant difference on the placebo, G3, or G5. Lastly, you have the abdominal muscle endurance, or MSU, which is maximum sit-ups. Based on the MSU, or maximum sit-ups, the creatine supplementation did not result in any significant improvements of any group. And if you notice the chart again, it shows that there was not a significant difference in the placebo group, the G3 or G5 group, from the pre-days to the post-days. The study concluded that creatine supplementation in low doses could be effective in minimal muscle strength and fatigue resistance, while the placebo group also showed significant increases in maximum strength in the 1 rep max. The percentages were significantly greater in the creatine supplemental groups. So if you notice the placebo versus the G3, you see the significant difference. The placebo versus the G5, there's a significant difference. But the interesting part is the G3 versus the G5. There's not a significant difference in those two. It is likely natural and physiological adaptations to resistance training could be attributed to a lower maximum strength increase being lower than the supplemental groups. To see significant improvements, a higher dose of 5 grams of creatine per day for a minimum of 14 days is necessary for significant improvements. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.